What would you do if a stranger offered to solve all your problems with a single, impossible condition? That's the question that haunted Ethan Riley as he sat in that sterile courthouse, signing papers that would change everything. Sometimes life corners you so completely that the unthinkable becomes inevitable. Sometimes desperation makes us do things we never imagined possible. And sometimes the people we trust least end up teaching us the most about ourselves. I'm telling you this story because everyone deserves to know that even in our darkest moments, we still have choices. We still have the power to write our own ending. But first, you need to understand how a 23-year-old law student became trapped in a web of revenge that had been spinning for decades. What happened next would test everything Ethan thought he knew about justice, family, and the price of the past. Rain hammered Boston's cobblestone streets, turning the historic city into a gray watercolor. Ethan Riley pulled his thin jacket closer as he hurried across Harvard Yard, sneakers slipping on wet stones. At 23, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned too young that the world wasn't fair. The weight on his shoulders wasn't just the rain-soaked backpack filled with law textbooks. It was medical bills piling up at home, threatening letters from creditors, and the look in his mother's eyes when she thought he wasn't watching. Sarah Riley was dying slowly, her cancer treatments draining what little remained of their family's finances. His father's business failures had left them with debt that multiplied like a disease. His sister Lily still believed in dreams. At 19, she painted watercolors with the same hope their father once had for his construction company. Art school acceptance letters meant nothing without tuition money, and Ethan had watched her carefully fold each one and place them in a box under her bed. The call came as Ethan sat in the university library, highlighting contract law cases with a pen running dry. The voice was crisp, authoritative, completely unfamiliar. "Mr. Riley? This is Eleanor Vance. I believe we should meet." 3 hours later, Ethan sat across from a woman who seemed to belong in a different century. Eleanor Vance commanded attention without effort. Silver hair pulled into an elegant chignon, a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ethan's tuition, and eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul. Brooks Bistro was the kind of place Ethan had only seen in movies. "You're wondering why I called," Eleanor said, cutting directly to the point. "The answer is simple. I need a husband, and you need money." Ethan's coffee cup rattled against the saucer. "I'm sorry, what?" "A business arrangement. Marriage in name only. I require someone young, presentable, and someone with sufficient motivation to honor our agreement." Her gaze never wavered. "Your family's financial difficulties make you ideal. You want me to marry you? Are you insane?" Eleanor's expression didn't change. "I'm 71 years old, Mr. Riley. I've long passed the age where insanity would be romantic. This is purely practical. I will pay off your mother's medical debts, clear your family's obligations, and provide a trust fund for your sister's education and your mother's continued care." Ethan stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. "This is sick. Whatever game, sit down." The command in her voice was absolute. "Your mother has perhaps 6 months with minimal treatment. Your sister will spend her life working jobs that kill her spirit, and you will never escape the weight of supporting them both." She paused. "I'm offering you freedom, Mr. Riley. The price is simply your name on a marriage certificate." That night, Ethan sat beside his mother's hospital bed, watching her sleep. The monitors beeped steadily, marking time like a countdown. Lily curled up in the chair beside him, her art portfolio clutched against her chest. The business card Eleanor had given him felt like it was burning in his pocket. When his mother stirred and smiled at him with eyes that held too much pain and too much love, Ethan made his choice. The courthouse wedding felt like a funeral. No flowers, no music, just mechanical vows that meant nothing and everything. Eleanor wore the same charcoal suit. Ethan had borrowed a tie from his roommate. "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." The words tasted like ashes. Eleanor's response was equally hollow. When the judge pronounced them married, there was no kiss, just a brief handshake that felt more like a business deal closing. Vance Manor rose from October mist like something from a Gothic novel, all dark stone and towering windows that seemed to watch Ethan as their car approached. The house was massive, elegant in the way old money always was, but there was something else, a heaviness that settled over Ethan's shoulders. Your room is in the east wing, Eleanor said, heels clicking against marble floors. Dinner is at 7. We dress. The staff moved like ghosts. A butler named Marcus, whose eyes seemed to hold secrets. A cook who never spoke directly to Ethan. Maids who looked away when he passed. But Ethan caught the whispers. Poor boy doesn't know what he's gotten into. She's been planning this for years. Nothing good ever comes from stirring up the past. Eleanor maintained the distance of a stranger. The house felt like a museum where Ethan was an unwelcome exhibit, constantly aware he didn't belong. During his restless explorations, Ethan discovered locked doors scattered throughout the mansion. But it was the door at the end of the west corridor that drew him back repeatedly. Something about it felt purposeful in its secrecy. Curiosity is dangerous in this house, Marcus said one evening, appearing beside Ethan quietly. What's behind that door? Marcus's weathered face showed nothing. The past, Mr. Riley, and the past in this house has teeth. 2 weeks into his new life, Ethan found the key sitting on Eleanor's desk in the library, an ornate brass thing that seemed to pulse with possibility. Eleanor was away on business, and the house felt even more hollow than usual. The key fit the west corridor door perfectly. The room beyond existed in perpetual twilight, heavy curtains blocking light. Dust motes danced in thin shafts that penetrated the gloom, and the air smelled of old paper and faded perfume. This wasn't just a forgotten room. It was a shrine. Photographs covered every surface. Eleanor as a young woman, radiant and smiling. A handsome man who must have been Harold Vance. And scattered among them, pictures of another couple Ethan didn't recognize. Until he looked closer, his heart stopped. The man had the same dark hair, the same stubborn jawline. It was his father, decades younger, arm in arm with Harold Vance. The papers on the desk told a story Ethan wished he'd never learned. Legal documents, business contracts, and beneath them all, a letter in Harold's desperate handwriting. William Riley has destroyed everything. The man I trusted with my life's work has stolen it all. Eleanor, my darling, I cannot live with what he has done to us. But it was the marriage certificate that made Ethan's knees buckle. His name and Eleanor's, dated 2 weeks before she'd ever contacted him. The marriage that felt like a choice had been a trap, meticulously planned and legally binding before he'd even known Eleanor existed. The diary was the final blow. Page after page of Eleanor's careful handwriting, documenting her investigation into Ethan's family, her strategy for approaching him, her satisfaction at how easily he'd fallen into her web. The son will pay for the father's sins. I will take everything from the Riley family, piece by piece, just as they took everything from us. Enjoying your reading? Ethan spun around, heart hammering. Eleanor stood in the doorway, no longer the composed society matron, but something far more dangerous. Her eyes glittered with cold satisfaction. You knew I'd find this, Ethan said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. I counted on it. What's the point of revenge if the victim doesn't understand why they're suffering? She stepped into the room. Your father was Harold's partner, his closest friend. Harold trusted him with everything. Our business, our savings, our future. Your father stole it all and let Harold take the blame when it collapsed. So you decided to destroy me instead? Eleanor's laugh was winter wind through bare branches. Destroy you? You flatter yourself. You're not important enough to destroy. You're just compensation. Harold died believing his best friend had betrayed him. I've spent 30 years making sure William Riley's son would understand what that feels like. The weight of it crashed over Ethan. Not just the betrayal, but the calculated coldness. He'd been purchased, manipulated, trapped in a marriage that was nothing more than elaborate torture. You're sick, he whispered. I'm thorough, Eleanor corrected. And this is only the beginning. The days that followed felt like walking through quicksand. Eleanor's mask had dropped completely, and she watched Ethan with the satisfied air of a cat who'd cornered a mouse. Every encounter became a subtle reminder of his powerlessness. The legal documents were ironclad, and Eleanor had made it clear that any attempt to break their arrangement would result in his family losing everything. But Ethan had learned something about himself in that dark room. He wasn't going to accept defeat. Marcus proved an unexpected ally. The butler had served the Vance family for 40 years, and while his loyalty to Eleanor was unquestionable, he seemed to have developed genuine sympathy for Ethan's situation. She wasn't always like this, Marcus said one evening in the kitchen. The Eleanor I knew when I first came here was kind, generous. Harold's death changed her, broke something inside. The thirst for revenge has consumed her. Did my father really do what she says? Marcus's silence was answer enough. Then why are you helping me? Because revenge poisons everyone it touches. Harold wouldn't have wanted this for her. Marcus paused. There are other documents in her office, things that might interest you. Maya Rodriguez had been Ethan's study partner at Harvard, brilliant and relentless when it came to legal research. When he called her, ostensibly seeking help with a research project about contract law and fraud, she threw herself into the work with characteristic intensity. This is fascinating, Maya said during one of their meetings. Hypothetically speaking, if someone were coerced into marriage through deception and false representation, there might be grounds for annulment. And if that same person could prove their spouse was engaged in ongoing criminal activity, the documents Marcus had quietly directed Ethan toward painted a disturbing picture. Eleanor wasn't just living off her late husband's wealth. She was actively expanding it through questionable means: shell companies, tax evasion schemes, and money laundering operations hidden behind charitable donations. The grieving widow was actually a criminal mastermind. She's not just getting revenge, Ethan realized during one late-night strategy session with Maya. She's rebuilding everything Harold lost, no matter what it takes. Eleanor, meanwhile, had begun to sense something was wrong. Her surveillance of Ethan became more obvious, more oppressive. Their encounters crackled with tension. "You seem distracted lately," Eleanor observed over dinner one evening. "I hope you're not developing any inappropriate ideas about your situation." "Just thinking about my future," Ethan replied carefully. Eleanor's smile was sharp as a blade. "Your future is exactly what I decided it to be." The morning Ethan decided to confront Eleanor, Boston was shrouded in fog. He'd spent the night finalizing his strategy with Maya, who'd worked her legal contacts to ensure everything was in place. The evidence was overwhelming, enough to bring down Eleanor's entire operation. He found her in the library, reading with the same composed elegance she brought to everything. For a moment, looking at her silver hair catching the lamplight, Ethan could almost imagine the woman Marcus remembered. "Eleanor, we need to talk." She looked up without surprise. "Do we? How refreshing. You've been so quiet lately." Ethan set the folder of documents on the desk between them. "I know everything about the money laundering, the shell companies, the tax evasion, all of it." For the first time since he'd known her, Eleanor's composure cracked. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You've been spying on me. You've been using me. I'd say we're even." Ethan's voice was steadier than he felt. "The question is, what happens now?" Eleanor stood slowly, and suddenly she seemed smaller, older. "You think you can threaten me? I've been planning this longer than you've been alive. I think you've been so focused on revenge that you forgot revenge destroys the person seeking it as much as the target." Ethan met her gaze without flinching. "My father hurt you and Harold. That's a fact I have to live with. But destroying me won't bring Harold back, and it won't heal whatever's been eating away at you for 30 years. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me," Eleanor snarled. "You have no idea what I've lost, what your family cost me. Then tell me. Make me understand why ruining my life is worth more than building something positive with what you have left." For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across Eleanor's face. Then, sirens sounded outside. Eleanor's head snapped toward the window, and Ethan saw genuine fear in her eyes for the first time. "What did you do?" she whispered. "What I had to do," Ethan replied. "The evidence is already with the authorities." The library door opened, and Detective Sarah Chen stepped in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "Eleanor Vance, you're under arrest for money laundering, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Eleanor stared at Ethan as the handcuffs clicked into place. "You have no idea what you've just done to yourself." "I've set myself free," Ethan said quietly. "Something you never learned how to do." As they led her away, Eleanor turned back one last time. This isn't over, Ethan Riley. The past has a long memory. The trial lasted 3 months and made headlines across New England. Eleanor was sentenced to 5 years, reduced due to her age and psychiatric evaluation revealing the depth of her trauma over Harold's death. Ethan felt no satisfaction in her conviction, only profound sadness for the woman who'd let grief consume 30 years of her life. The legal proceedings left Ethan as sole heir to Eleanor's legitimate assets. Vance Manor felt different now. No longer a prison, but simply an empty house filled with someone else's memories. He sold it to a developer, using the proceeds to ensure his family's financial security and establish something he'd been thinking about since the trial began. The Harold Vance Memorial Foundation for Second Chances started small, just a scholarship fund for law students from difficult backgrounds. But it grew quickly, supported by people who understood the power of choosing forgiveness over revenge. Ethan returned to Harvard with a clarity of purpose he'd never had before, focusing his studies on white-collar crime and victim advocacy. His mother's health improved dramatically once financial stress was removed. Lily flourished at Rhode Island School of Design, her paintings taking on new depth and vibrancy. She'd started a series called Redemption that featured broken objects being transformed into something beautiful, art that perfectly captured what Ethan felt about his own life. Marcus stayed in touch, having found a position with another family in Beacon Hill. "You did the right thing," he told Ethan during one of their occasional coffee meetings. Eleanor needed to face consequences for her actions, but more importantly, you needed to prove to yourself that you weren't just a victim. Maya had been accepted into the prosecutor's office and was already making a name for herself taking down financial criminals. "You started something," she told Ethan. "Every case I win, I think about how you refuse to stay trapped in someone else's story." The letter arrived on a Tuesday in spring, 18 months after Eleanor's sentencing. Ethan recognized the precise handwriting immediately, though something about it seemed softer than he remembered. "Dear Ethan," it began, "I have been thinking a great deal about our conversation in the library and about something you said that I dismissed at the time. You told me that revenge destroys the person seeking it as much as the target. I believe I owe you an apology, not just for what I did to you, but for what I did to myself. Prison has given me something I haven't had in 30 years. Time to think without the constant need to plan someone's downfall. I've been seeing a counselor here, an older woman who lost her husband in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. She spent 5 years consumed with hatred for the man who killed him, until she realized that her anger was killing her too. I loved Harold more than I knew how to express while he was alive. When he died, I thought keeping that love alive meant keeping his anger alive too. I was wrong. Love doesn't survive on hatred any more than a garden grows in poisoned soil. You could have destroyed me completely with what you found. Instead, you chose to stop the cycle. That takes a kind of strength I never had, and wisdom I never developed. The foundation you started in Harold's name, he would have been proud of that. He would have been proud of you. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that your choice to build something positive from the wreckage of our situation has inspired me to try to do the same. I'm teaching literacy classes here, helping other inmates prepare for their GED exams. It's not much, but it's honest work that helps people instead of hurting them. Thank you for showing me that there was another way. Sincerely, Eleanor." Ethan read the letter 3 times, then walked to the window of his new apartment overlooking Boston Common. Spring was coming early this year, and the trees were beginning to bud despite occasional March snow. Change was possible, even after the longest winters. He wrote back that same evening, not because Eleanor deserved forgiveness, but because he deserved the peace that came with offering it. The letter was brief, expressing hope for her continued healing and sharing news about the foundation's expansion into programs for families affected by white-collar crime. 2 years later, when Eleanor was released on good behavior, she sent one final note. "I've decided to spend my remaining years working with a program that helps elderly inmates reintegrate into society. It seems appropriate that I should learn firsthand what it means to rebuild a life from nothing." Standing outside the Vance Foundation's new offices in downtown Boston, Ethan watched the morning sun burn away the last traces of fog. The brass nameplate by the door read, "Harold Vance Memorial Foundation, building bridges from yesterday to tomorrow." Below it, in smaller letters. Ethan Riley, Executive Director. The past would always be part of his story, but it no longer defined his future. He'd learned that justice wasn't about punishment. It was about creating something better from the pieces of what was broken. Every scholarship awarded, every family helped, every life given a second chance was proof that even the deepest wounds could heal if you chose hope over hatred. The ghosts of the past had finally found peace, and so had he.